The opinions expressed on the Custody Queen Show are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for personal, professional legal advice. The persons discussed are fictional and not based on actual clients.
Thought it was love, had kids in between. You can count on us, we're the Custody Queens. Yeah, you can count on us, we're the Custody Queens.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to yet another amazing Saturday on Go Country 105. We are your Custody Queens. I'm Kristen Holstrom.
And I'm Sam McBride.
And we have a great show planned for you today. Divorce and separation is very difficult, and we have a guest here today that is going to introduce and talk and walk you through this process. Sam, can you introduce her?
Sure, Kristen, thanks. So today on our show, we have Laura Rhodes-Levin. Hi,
Hello.
Laura. Thank you so much for coming. Laura is a licensed therapist who specializes in the evaluation and treatment of anxiety, depression, and trauma. She is also the founder of The Missing Piece, which is a center for anxiety. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Laura?
Yeah, I have found over the years that even though I think I'm a good therapist, all the therapists at my center are excellent, it takes more than flour to make a cake. So when you're experiencing anxiety, depression, trauma, it's going to be in your whole body. Even art therapy is going to express something different. So most of my clients come for an intensive program of 9 hours a week where they get brain work, they get massage, they get energy work, movement therapy, group therapy.
It's a total package deal.
That's where it all is.
Yeah.
So why only address the thinking obsessive part?
Coming from someone like myself that does deal with bouts of anxiety, I agree with you that it is so much more than just attacking one part of the therapeutic process. I think what you have is amazing, and I think what you're doing for people is really incredible.
Thank you.
And that's honestly why Kristen and I are so excited to have this show and this week's episode. Is this is another layer to the family law arena that Kristen and I are in daily. There's a lot of people that are naturally suffering from a lot of things, and so we want to make sure that we bring education to other aspects of family law, not just the divorce process.
Yeah, and the divorce process or the separation process, even when you're not married, just the separation and moving into the next transition, as we often call it, that creates a lot of depression and anxiety. And in my experience, that if my clients do not get the appropriate medical treatment and the therapeutic advice and consulting that they need, it makes it a lot harder of a transition for them, the effect on the kids, and it also makes the attorney's job more difficult too.
Yeah, I bet.
And you can attest that emotions are crazy, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure you're part of that mental health piece because people are trusting you to get their lives back on track, make sure that they're taken care of and their side is covered, and that is going to provide tremendous comfort.
Right. All right, so I think before we kind of get into today's episode, we should start off with something maybe a little fun, our CQ book. What do you think, Kristen?
All right, let's do it. So, Sam, you want me to start with you, or do you want me to start with Laura, our guest?
Well, if you're giving me the option, I'm going to throw Laura under the bus, and I'm going to let her start. So for anyone who's listening for the first time, our CQ book is a book of 1,000,000 questions. Kristen is holding the book, and she's going to flip through and pick a random question for Laura to answer, and then we'll just take turns.
All right, Laura, let me just, fan through a really good
All right, pick.
All right. What is the most expensive thing you have ever lost?
Wow. Hope.
Wow.
That's deep.
Yeah, I think you need hope more than anything. I think that if you came into a therapist's office or into an attorney's office and they said, it's probably not going to work, but I'll do the best I can, that is just, there goes
deflating.
Everything right out the window. And when you don't have hope, that's actually where depression gets so dangerous. That's where suicidal ideation starts coming in, because when you've lost hope, there's no point, and that's the biggest cost ever.
And is there any specific factor or trigger that you think leads to the losing of hope?
You know, actually anxiety. And I tell people anxiety is a liar that predicts doom. We never think of, oh, well, maybe I won't live in, for example, in as nice a place, or maybe I won't get to spend as much time with the kids. It's always, I'm going to be homeless. I'll never see my kids again. They'll hate me. So when that anxiety is predicting doom, you're going to get depressed about it.
Especially if you're not doing anything to counteract that, to
Absolutely.
get some help.
I often say that you've got an advocate for the depression and the trauma. Now you have to create a case for the positive, what is going to work, and put just as many bricks in that case, if you will, as possible to contest the negative.
Yeah, and I can speak for myself. I think Sam might agree with me. Is I can be really dramatic sometimes. You know, it can be a really little thing, and you're right. My anxiety can get in my head, and I turn it into this massive volcano. When in reality, if I just face it head on, I deal with it directly, and then once I've dealt with it, I move on to the next. But it's like those 4 or 5 days of sleepless nights and thinking about whatever this issue is. I've now turned a a molehill into a mountain, or a mountain into a molehill?
Yeah. Yeah, you got that one.
Everybody knows what I'm saying. I see Sam was so surprised I actually got it right this time.
Kristen's notorious for not getting those analogies right.
But I tell that to my clients, that it's in our heads that we look at this issue, and it is often in our head so much bigger and so much deeper than it is in reality. It's kind of like when you're waiting for results from the doctor's office. And we think, how many of us have gone to Google, and for instance, I had a sty recently, and I go and I Google the sty, and
Don't go to Google.
I have literally diagnosed myself with stage 4, cancer by my sty, and it probably was just sleeping with my makeup on because I was tired the night before. But I try to tell my clients, let's tackle one thing at a time. And I promise, if you get the therapy that you need to deal with your emotions, because that's just a huge battle internally. Let us deal with the other side of it, and let's attack each little thing at once.
Yeah, and even if it is a big thing, I recently, about 2 months ago, was biopsied for potential breast cancer. Note to self, don't get a mammogram right after a COVID test, shot. But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to think about this. Right. I went to Tahoe for the weekend, and I laughed with my friends, and I had a great time, and I waited, and luckily everything's fine. But even if it's something scary, what's the point in just sitting in it?
Right. And I think, too, for me and for a lot of people, I think that it's identifying when you're feeling that way and you're going down that negative path where you are somewhat spiraling with your emotions, and you need to identify it to help get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of comes with age and maturity too, because I can tell you that even when I've watched my clients grow through the process and myself grow over the years, that I feel like I'm much better at identifying these obstacles now rather than letting my head run wild. But it is. You have to identify the issue, identify that it's there, and then remind yourself that you just have to keep moving forward and have the tools, which are generally provided through treatment and medical, medical professionals. But those tools will allow you to identify and move forward.
Yeah, and I also think it's one of those areas that people want to push under the rug and not talk about, and so you can feel very isolated and alone. And if you feel isolated and you feel like you're the only person that has these thoughts or feels this way, I think that can kind of go back to the losing of hope, because you feel desperate and you don't know how to handle the situation or where to turn.
Yeah, and shame.
Right.
Oh wow! I
this
love
got
everything.
deep.
Yeah,
this got really deep.
You're saying, I really like it. Is there anything that Sam and I can do as attorneys? I mean, I think that we do a pretty good job of identifying these issues with our clients, because a lot of people are in very desperate situations when they come to see us. They're dealing with domestic violence. They're dealing with, losing a spouse or a partner that they've been with for 20 years. Now the kids' visitation schedule is prohibiting them from seeing their kids every day. It's a lot of often a desperate situation. Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything else other than referring our clients to get therapy and to hiring an LMFT, which is yourself?
No, that's it. Just therapy. Send them to me. No.
That's all you can do. If you want to keep your hope, you got to go to Laura.
I do have a short list, and Laura is on it, and we will make sure at the end of this episode that we give all of you listening out there Laura's information. If you happen to be listening to this episode and you want to call and get information about Laura, please call us at 1-800-419-7772. That's 1-800-419-7772. We'll also have Laura's information on our social feed so that you can get it from there. But we'll make sure we give it to you all. But please make sure everyone is taking care of themselves. This is really, even aside from divorce and separation, this is a year where nobody should be losing hope.
Absolutely. And I'm just kidding. Obviously, there's lots more that can be done than therapy.
Right.
But therapy, like attorneys, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So it's
Yeah.
important that you do find someone that you like and trust.
So important. So important. Trust is the absolute most important thing, I think, in therapy, even more than whatever treatment objectives or interventions there are. It's the relationship.
All right. Thanks for that, Laura. I'm going to ask Sam a question from our CQ book.
Uh-oh.
I read one and I had to skip over it really quick because Sam doesn't know anything about smart devices. So, I had to
Here we
skip
go.
I had to skip that question because I think she had the iPhone 6 for like 5 years.
No, I had the first iPhone, and then I had the iPhone 4, and now I have the 10. I have my phone until it breaks.
I know, but you had the iPhone 4 until like last year.
Right. No, yeah, it still actually can plug in, but the problem I ran into is that that's the old school chargers, and I'd show up and my phone would never be charged because I'm not very responsible with my phone, and no one would have the charger. So I finally said, oh, okay, I'll get the 10 at the time, and I will have that probably until the 20 comes out, if that's even a thing. I don't even know. What are we on now for the iPhone?
I don't know. I have the 11 Pro. I don't know if there's something beyond that. I'm sure there
Yeah.
is. So, but and coming from Sam's really good friend, she doesn't answer her cell phone much. She will text you, but you can always call that number or 1-800 number if you want to get a consult with her. So, all right, Sam, I have a good one for you.
Uh-oh.
Would you ever strike if you felt your employer wasn't treating you fairly?
Oh, what? Say that again?
Would you ever strike?
Define strike.
Go on strike.
Oh, like a picket?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you felt your employer wasn't treating you fairly.
Kristen, I would never do that because I wouldn't know what it was like to get treated unfairly.
Good answer. That was straight from the attorney custody queen, Sam herself.
I joke with Kristen, actually. I say, if you ever fire me, we have a ton of offices. I say I'll just show up at another one and start working, and it'll take her a while to figure it out.
All right,
All right,
Sam.
no, give me this book. It's your turn. My turn, your turn. My turn to ask you a question. Okay.
Where'd you get this book?
Our production team actually created this book, and I don't even know where they got these questions because there's like 6,000 questions in there.
That's awesome.
It is. It's fun and it's quirky, and it always keeps us with spontaneous answers because we never know what the questions are going to say.
Super.
All right, Kristen, I know the answer to this. Are you a lover or a fighter?
It depends on the situation, but I think that I'm clearly down to fight if I have to. I mean, mama bear, full force, full effect. I think that is, I am a mama bear for sure, and that'd probably be the easiest way. But I am a lover. I am a Scorpio.
You're a lover. She's a lover. The answer is she's a lover, and she will fight for the people that she loves.
That is true.
That's the answer.
I am fiercely loyal and fiercely protective for the very small village that I have. But most of the time, peace and love. Not fighting.
Agreed. All right, so that was fun. I'm going to hand you that back.
Okay.
I think it's time for our next segment, which is Divorce Wars. So Divorce Wars, for anyone listening for the first time, is a fun little segment that Kristen and I do where we listen to a fictional fact pattern and we analyze how that relates to the law.
Yes, and I can't wait for our story today. I am sure it is filled with all kinds of interesting facts. So shoot it, ladies.
This is Divorce Wars. My ex and I separated before the divorce. We had no children except our dog, who we both loved dearly. I had to go away on a business trip, so she agreed to watch the dog while I had to work for the week. Upon return, I tried calling her to make arrangements to pick up my dog. I called, no answer. I go knock on the door where she lives, no response, not even a bark. Then she avoids me for a week. At this point, I'm just so worried. I just really want my dog back. She finally texts me that she had the dog put down and that if she can't have the dog, neither can I.
As Sam and I are both extreme dog lovers, I take much offense to this fact pattern.
I don't like this story.
I don't, and unfortunately, I have had similar fact patterns that I've actually had to deal with in real life. It does happen. People use, just like people use children as a weapon, people use dogs as a weapon because they are often a very special part of, their ex-partner, ex-spouse's life. But Sam, I'm gonna let you start with kind of the analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying that's a restraining order. It's also likely a crime. I don't know how somebody that wasn't the owner of a dog could actually lawfully be putting a dog down. So that's a question I have. In general, it sounded like the parties in this case weren't actually married. If they were married, there would be a different analysis because we would be talking about potentially pet custody, which is a new area of the law, I believe January 2019. Don't quote me on that. There were some changes to legislation which provide judicial officers the ability to potentially put in temporary orders for dogs based on their best interest. They're still ultimately categorized as property, even though dogs should not be property. They are little baby humans. I love my dog and I will take every opportunity to shout her out. But yeah, circling back to this fact pattern, it's awful. And if you are concerned that something like that could be happening or someone is trying to hold something over you, hopefully you can contact an attorney or law enforcement before something like this happens.
Yeah, Sam's dead on. Pets are still considered property, and yes, especially in Orange County, they make orders regarding visitation in the best interest of dogs fairly often, even the best interest of the medical care of the dog and who would be the best vet. I mean, this is a pretty common issue that we've been dealing with, but for the dog to be stolen and put down, that is clearly falls within the umbrella of abuse and would be necessary to it depends if they're not married and their relationship, it sounds like they had a romantic relationship, so the restraining order would be filed in family court. But yeah, get some cameras and get that toxic person out of your life. That is the number one. And yes, I would make a police report and go from there because there's obviously a lot more questions that we would like to have on a one-on-one conversation on this, but get that toxic person out of your life, get a restraining order, and move the heck on.
And just to really quick add on to what Kristen was saying, with restraining order, you can get a restraining order potentially against any individual. It just depends. The nature of your relationship is going to determine what court you file. So if you have a relationship with somebody or you're related by the second degree of consanguinity or affinity, you could file in family law court. If you didn't meet those requirements, then you would go to the civil courthouse. So it doesn't mean that you couldn't get a restraining order if you didn't have a particular relationship with someone. It just means you need to know where to file.
Yep. Do you have anything to add, Laura, about pets and that kind of analysis?
Honestly, that was so scary when it took that turn. To me, psychologically, that borders, if not completely fits the bill for sociopathic and lacking empathy. And my immediate concern would be for this person who could very possibly be in danger themselves.
Absolutely, and I think that's the way that most judges look at that fact. It's unfortunate that the dog was killed in that fact pattern, but that's the way that the court's going to look at those facts. Is clearly somebody is trying to hurt that person. Clearly that person is in imminent danger or harm based on those facts. All right, let's take it to the next. Before we move on, we have to, say our favorite line. All right, and Sam? And we hope they live happily ever after divorce.
All right, so let's get into the show. So I'm gonna pick on Laura a little bit and ask you some questions. I've had quite a few things that I've considered wanting to talk to you about on the radio for some time, but I think the major thing I want to ask you about is, divorce and separations and the new things that you've seen in light of COVID and in light of the global pandemic, that added layer.
Well, in particularly, when I was growing up, the nesting term was not a thing. Kids were we were more something that was like had on the side. We weren't really thought of as part of the equation.
Right.
But now with the whole back and forth of dad staying in the house, then mom and mom or dad and dad, whatever the case may be, the exposure that people are having, and when there's a lot of contention. I know one family where the kids just happened to end up at dad's, and dad said, well, you can't see them now because it's COVID and you're in a different area. So she didn't see her children for 4 months because of COVID.
Yeah,
Wow.
there was a point at the beginning of COVID where a lot of parents were using COVID as a weapon. And some situations, actually many were justified, immune compromised, health concerns, the elderly, people that were pregnant. Obviously there were a lot of situations and we didn't know anything about it, but I can tell you there was a lot of parents that used COVID as a weapon, and the children often went months without seeing the other parent. And the courts really have turned that around and taken a pretty hard stance universally, I think, across the counties to continue and enforce the visitation. The visitation continues as ordered.
And the irony is the kids got COVID there, and that's what actually ended it. It was like, okay, well, now all bets are off.
That is ironic. That's Murphy's Law. That, of course,
Right?
they would get it there.
So more generally, Laura, with separation and divorce, you see a lot of people coming to you kind of at that moment when you're seeing a breakup or you're seeing a separation?
Well, interestingly and sadly, oftentimes couples come in when it's really almost too late. And it's never too late in certain situations, but people don't come in for therapy until the wheels have come off the bus. And there's so much repair to do. And there's so much heartbreak and hurt and anger. And what I'm always telling my clients is always under anger, 100% of the time is fear.
Right.
And so you've really pushed buttons in each other, creating such dangerous vulnerabilities and lack of intimacy, because I consider intimacy to be emotional safety.
Right.
And once you've lost that intimacy, it can be really hard to repair it. And if they come in after they have separated, there's so much shame, guilt, failure, all these thoughts that you wouldn't say to a friend, you say to yourself.
Right.
So and I'll tell them, gosh, if your little child just went through this, or a friend, would you say, wow, you're divorced, you're a failure, you're a complete, you should be ashamed of yourself, look at all the things you could have done differently? Their first response is, oh my God, I would never say that. But they do. They say that to themselves all night and all day, and that's what they lay in bed ruminating about. Or it's the finger pointing, the you, which then makes you a victim. So it's also not helpful.
Yeah, and the you happens a lot throughout the divorce process too. And that's where Sam and I try to really educate our clients that take yourself out of the equation, take the other party out of the equation. Let's come from the the child-centered approach of what's best for our kids, because they want to, you don't do our kids' homework, you don't clean our kids' clothes, it's your fault that their assignment's late, it's your fault they didn't make it to soccer practice. And once we can break down those walls, either with their attorney or through co-parenting or talking parents or whatever they are using as tools to co-parent, once we can break through that and we stop the pointing of the fingers, I think everybody evolves. We try to educate our clients that divorce is not a failure. It's an evolution to the next phase of your life.
Beautifully said. I like that.
And I feel like it brings up a good point. From what I see a lot is that most of this is a breakdown in communication. And when we see parents separate, they can't agree on the color of the sky, but often if we can help them partly by, referring them to receive other services, or by telling them what, our experience in the family law realm is. When we can build back up that communication, that's often very productive. The lack of communication, in my opinion, just really,
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because people will come to me and they'll say, we just don't communicate. And what I would share with you is they can communicate. If you say, pass me this cup of coffee, that person can pass it to you. What they've lost is the ability, as I said before, for emotional safety. Mm-hmm. So they don't communicate because they're afraid to say or make a request for fear of some sort of retaliation.
Which gets exemplified in the family law realm.
Yes.
Because you're so nervous that saying one thing could have an effect on you negatively in court.
Mm-hmm. And so really it's about reestablishing some sort of emotional safety so that arrangements can be made and you can put aside your stuff for the kids.
And when people are coming into your office, I'm sure you've been doing this a long time.
Oh God, can you see the gray eyebrows?
I'm
just kidding.
You speak from such a place of experience and knowledge, but I always tell people that if you go into therapy, and I love it when I'm having a conversation with someone, anyone, and they said, well, my therapist says I'm doing great, my therapist says that I'm evolving, and my therapist says that, I don't even have anything to work on. And I'm looking at this person going, what did you tell the therapist? Because just like us as an attorney, if you don't tell us all of the facts, then we can get blindsided in court. We can't protect you. We can't do our job as attorneys in the best way possible.
Such a good point.
But if you go to therapy and you don't truly tell the therapist your concerns, your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, you can't really get the treatment that you need. Is that something that you come across? That people are ashamed to tell you, their vices or things they deal with, their thoughts?
Yeah, and that's really what we were speaking about earlier, is really trusting your therapist. Mm-hmm. It's really got to be somebody, and I tell my clients, it's an honor to work with people. I don't take the journey lightly because you're really bearing your soul. I mean, that is the idea. And
right.
So your job as a therapist is building that bond and breaking down those defenses. And someone said to me years ago, if you haven't pissed off your client, you're not doing your work.
I agree with that. Because that means you're telling them what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear.
Right. You do need to help them break down defenses and those. How do we defend ourselves, right? We're animals at our basic core. And every animal, like, we puff up, we get really big, we show our quills, we show how tough we are or how, untouchable we are. And it keeps us safe until it doesn't keep us safe anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's when you want to break them down and get
build
in
them
there.
back
Did that
up.
answer your question?
No, it absolutely
Yeah,
did. It absolutely did.
So, Laura, do you have any tips that anyone out there listening can kind of try to implement on a daily or weekly basis to help them with anxiety or anything they're dealing with?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, we don't just happen in our head, we happen in our bodies. The reason why people enjoy vacation places so much is their senses take over and it smells good and it feels good and it sounds good. So really being in the moment, I feel bad that the term mindfulness has been misused perhaps or not fully explained. When we talk about really being in the moment, that's an action. It's not a thought, it's an action. And so really looking at how beautiful the sky is, or if you're trying to ground yourself, you can do little things like, how many colors of red do I see in the room right now? Believe it or not, if you're listening to music and you put on some nice smell that really makes you feel good and you focus on what's going on, it's hard to think at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that's what you want to do. You want to give that
find that thing that helps you do
egomaniacal
that.
frontal cortex. Mm-hmm. I say this probably too often, but since we're talking about dogs, if your dog is upset, you don't say, what triggered you, Fluffy? You know?
Well, I might say that, even if it's ridiculous.
Sam probably would ask Pam what triggered her.
You want to soothe the animal, soothe yourself, soothe your children. You know, it's great to talk to your kids, but then it's also important to help them actually feel okay and connect to the moment they're in. Most people, with the exception of that dog, you're probably okay.
Right.
Where you are right now, you're probably fine and safe. So remember that.
It's very true. I mean, how often have you, for instance, my husband planted these beautiful flowers in these pots that have been sitting empty for 2 years since we bought the house. 2 years they've been sitting empty. And 2 days ago, he planted them, and
What do we got? Do we know?
They're just beautiful purple flowers. I couldn't even tell you what kind of flowers.
Sounds
they were.
like tulips.
But I walked by on my way walked by them to my car on the way to work yesterday, and I said, wow, those flowers are really pretty. And he just happened to send me a text message, that just said, did you stop and, sometimes you just have to stop and smell the flowers, and wished me, good luck. Or
Good one, Jeremy.
Told me to have a good day. And I'll tell you, when I pulled up that day, not only did I just look at the flowers, I actually stopped, put my purse down, which I don't even know if it's a purse anymore because I carry the whole world in there.
It's a bowling bag.
But I actually smelled the flowers, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's being present you have to make it a habit, because it's something I've been working on all year, especially with my kids, to truly be present, not just look at them, smile, thinking of everything I have to do in the back, but getting on my knees, taking my shoes off, playing, we were playing Operation the other day, but truly being present and feeling their emotions.
Yeah, and it's not just the flowers. Something I tell people all the time, which maybe you can. A lot of times, I think in divorce and in breakup, I just had a client in my office yesterday literally talking about this. He can't listen to love songs anymore because it just makes him cry. All he does is listen to the news. And what I tell people is listen to love songs, but sing them to yourself. It sounds so corny, but it's really very healing. You know how sweet it is to be loved by you? I know I'm dating myself, James Taylor. I'm going way back. But it's not just, it's all your senses that can bring you home and help you feel good.
That is great advice, Laura. Thank you so much for being on our show today. We really loved having you. We'll have to bring you back in the near future for part 2.
Anytime.
I think there's so much more that we could explore with everything that you do and how it relates to family law. So, Laura, if our listeners are trying to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, and thank you guys too for what you do, because you're helping people every day, and it's so important. So if you want to reach me or any of my beautiful team, we are at the Missing Piece Center for Anxiety in Agora Hills, which is in LA County actually. And you can go to our website, which is Missing Piece, but that's peace like peace of mind, PEACE, the number 4, anxiety.com. So that's missingpiece4anxiety.com. And if you do reach out, I hope we can help.
And we'll make sure that we have all of Laura's information on our social feeds as well. Thank you for joining us this Saturday. It was a pleasure to spend your Saturday sunny morning with all of you lovely men and women. We love being love having you as part of our Go Country family.
And remember, if you guys have any questions or need a consultation for family law, feel free to call us at 1-800-419-7772. That's 1-800-419-7772.
And make sure you check our social media for our giveaways. And we'll see everyone next Saturday. And remember,
Let love rule.